Let's join Dad Arthur, Mom Ellie, their children Max, Lily, and magical dog Barley in their new adventure in Dream Garden. The Dream Gardener and the Labyrinth of Abandonment. Part 1. The Echo of the Silent Carnival. The transition into the Garden of Eternal Dreams was becoming familiar to the Wheelers, yet it never lost its wonder. As the Wander Wagon rolled over the bridge of solidified moonlight, the air grew thick with the scent of lavender and damp earth. But today, the vibrant colors of the garden were muted. A heavy, silver-gray mist clung to the floating islands, and the dream bubbles that usually drifted like playful balloons were slow and sluggish, their surfaces clouded with a dull frost. Arthur brought the van to a halt near the Silver Willow. Celestian was waiting, but he looked different. His cloak of petals was no longer wilting into ash. Instead, it was being choked by a thick, gray ivy that moved with a slow, deliberate shiver. The ivy had no thorns, but its leaves were shaped like teardrops, and wherever they touched, the sound of the garden seemed to vanish. "The silence is spreading," Celestian said, his voice barely a whisper. He pointed toward a distant island that was almost entirely swallowed by a swirling, gray fog. "A new weed has taken root, the vine of disconnect. It feeds on the fear of being forgotten, the labyrinth of abandonment." Max looked at weed on island. "Someone is trapped there?" "A boy named Leo," Celestian replied. "In his waking life, he feels like a ghost, unnoticed and left behind. In his dreams, that feeling has built a fortress of solitude. If the vine finishes its work, Leo will lose the ability to hear the voices of those who love him, and he will wander the gray mist forever." Barley, usually the most energetic of the group, was strangely focused. He wasn't barking. Instead, he was sniffing the gray ivy, his tail low but steady. He let out a soft, melodic woof, and a tiny spark of gold flickered at the tip of his nose. "We're going in," Ellie said, her voice firm. "We won't let him stay lost." The family approached the island of mist. To enter this nightmare, they didn't need to touch a thorn. They simply had to step into the silence. As they crossed the threshold, the world of Celestian vanished. They found themselves standing at the entrance of a massive, sprawling amusement park. It was a place of dazzling lights and towering roller coasters, but something was deeply wrong. There was no wind, no laughter. The colorful carousel turned in total silence, the wooden horses rising and falling like ghosts. The popcorn machines were full, but cold. It was a carnival built for thousands, yet it was utterly empty. "Hello?" Max called out. His voice didn't echo. It felt as though the air itself was swallowing the sound, leaving only a hollow ringing in his ears. "Stay close," Arthur warned, his hand on Max's shoulder. "The mist here isn't just weather, it's a maze. It wants us to lose each other." As they walked down the main midway, the gray ivy began to creep across the colorful tiles. It muffled their footsteps until they couldn't even hear their own breathing. It was then that they saw him. High above the park, sitting on the very top gondola of a frozen Ferris wheel, was Leo. He looked like a small, lonely dot against the gray sky, clutching a frayed teddy bear to his chest. "Leo, we're here!" Lily shouted, but the sound died just a few feet away from her lips. The labyrinth reacted to their presence. The straight path to the Ferris wheel suddenly twisted. The rows of game booths stretched and lengthened, turning into towering walls of gray stone and shivering ivy. Within seconds, the family was separated from the view of the Ferris wheel. They were trapped in a maze of silent corridors. A cold, hollow voice began to hum, a sound like wind blowing through a pipe. It was the echo of the void, the spirit of the nightmare. "Why do you call to him?" the voice whispered, seemingly from inside their own minds. "He has accepted the quiet. He knows that no one comes back." He is safe in his solitude. Max felt a chill. The walls of the maze seemed to be moving closer, trying to wedge themselves between him and his parents. He reached out, but he couldn't see his father's hand through the thickening fog. Suddenly, a brilliant, warm light cut through the gray. Barley had seen enough. The golden retriever planted his paws firmly on the ground and let out a bark that sounded like a golden bell. As he did, a wave of shimmering amber light erupted from his fur. He began to run, not away from the fog, but directly into the heart of the silence. Wherever Barley's paws touched the ground, he left a glowing, golden footprint. A trail of sparkling dust began to rise behind him, smelling of sun-warmed hay and home-cooked Sunday dinners. The scent was so powerful, so real, that the gray ivy shriveled away from it. "Look!" Max pointed. "The golden trail!" Barley wasn't just running. He was weaving a net of connection. The golden dust hung in the air, creating a glowing thread that linked Arthur to Ellie and Ellie to the children. The silence of the labyrinth was being punctured by the vibrant, living energy of the dog. High above, Leo shifted. For the first time, he turned his head away from the empty horizon. He couldn't see the wheelers yet, but he could smell something. Something that felt like a hug. The battle for the boy in the clouds had begun, and Barley was leading the way. The Dream Gardener and the Labyrinth of Abandonment, Part 2, The Symphony of the Golden Scent. The Golden Trail was more than just a path. It was a living bridge of memory and warmth in a world that had forgotten both. As Barley raced through the gray, shifting corridors of the amusement park, the sparkling dust he left behind acted like a magical glue, holding the family together. The gray ivy hissed as the golden footprints touched the ground, recoiling as if burned by the scent of a summer afternoon. "Stay within the light!" Arthur shouted, his voice finally finding its strength as the golden glow pushed back the muffling silence. "Barley is creating a safe zone. Don't let the mist touch you." The golden trail had linked the wheelers together, but the labyrinth was a jealous master. It did not want its prisoner to be found. As the family reached the foot of the frozen Ferris wheel, the silence grew so heavy it felt like lead in their lungs. High above, Leo remained a motionless silhouette against the gray, featureless sky. "We need to break through to him," Ellie cried, her voice strained against the muffling air. "Barley, use the scent wave. Remind him of the world outside." Barley planted his paws firmly on the tiles and took a deep breath. His chest expanded, and his golden fur began to vibrate with an intense, rhythmic energy. With a powerful bark, he released a swirling storm of amber dust. It was a concentrated essence of home, the smell of cinnamon rolls cooling on a windowsill, the earthy scent of the Wander Wagon's leather seats, and the sharp, clean aroma of mountain pines. The waves of scent spiraled upward, hungry to reach the lonely boy. But the vine of disconnect was faster. As the scent waves neared the top gondola, the gray ivy reacted with violent precision. It wove itself into a seamless, airtight cocoon around Leo's carriage, forming a jagged shell that looked like frozen smoke. The beautiful sense of home washed over the exterior, but could not find a single crack. Inside his cage of shadow, Leo smelled nothing but the cold, metallic scent of the fog. To him, the world was still empty. The echo of the void, the hollow spirit of the nightmare, hissed in triumph. "He cannot smell your memories," the voice whispered into the Wheelers' minds. "To him, you are already myths, legends of a world that moved on without him." Then, the nightmare struck its cruelest blow. From the shadows of the empty midway, flickering shapes began to emerge. They were the shadows of departure. Dark, blurred figures of people Leo once knew. They began to walk in a slow, steady line toward the park's exit. Not one of them turned back. Not one of them called out. "Look at them," the hollow voice whispered, vibrating in Leo's ears and echoing in the minds of the Wheelers. "They have gone. They did not look back. Why should you be different, little Leo? Silence is the only thing that stays." Inside the gondola, Leo watched these shadows through the gaps in the ivy. The sight acted like poison. "They're leaving," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Everyone always leaves." As his despair deepened, the vine of disconnect fed on his pain. The ivy grew thicker, its teardrop leaves swelling with gray liquid. The vines began to crush the gondola, the metal groaning under the pressure, and the entire Ferris wheel began to tilt toward the dark abyss. "The scent didn't reach him!" Max shouted, his eyes wide with fear. "He's giving up! Look at the vines!" "If he can't smell us, he must see the truth," Arthur said, his jaw set. "Barley, the lantern! We need a light that tells a story." Barley sat back on his haunches. He focused all the warmth of his loyal heart, and a brilliant, concentrated orb of golden light began to form between his paws. A few seconds later, the great spiritual lantern appeared between his paws, casting a beam as sharp as a lighthouse. Together, the family held the lantern high. The golden beam sliced through the fog and struck the shadows of departure. In the brilliant light, the people walking away began to flicker and glitch. Leo, looking down from his cage, saw the light hit a shadow that looked like his father. Under the golden glow, the shadow didn't look like a person anymore. It looked like a hollow puppet made of smoke and gray vines. Leo blinked, his grip on his teddy bear loosening. "Are they not real?" A tiny spark of doubt flickered in his mind. "Now," Ellie urged. "The reflection! We need him to look for us!" Ellie reached into her bag and pulled out a small, polished silver mirror. She caught the intense golden beam from Barley's lantern and angled it with surgical precision. A tiny, dancing sun bunny, a bright, playful dot of light, shot upward and landed right on the teddy bear in Leo's arms. The boy gasped. The little light danced across the bear's button eye and then hopped onto the gray ivy walls of his prison. It was a signal. It wasn't a natural part of the nightmare. It was a living, moving message. "Who is doing that?" Leo wondered. He leaned forward, his heart beating faster. Someone is sending a signal. Someone is still there, watching me. As the doubt took hold of him, the nightmare began to lose its grip. The vine of disconnect relied on the absolute certainty of being alone. The moment Leo questioned his isolation, the ivy began to lose its color. Its teardrop leaves started to shrivel and turn into dry, harmless dust. "Keep the light steady," Arthur commanded. The more Leo doubted the nightmare, the more the mist around the base of the wheel began to evaporate. Slowly, the thick, gray veil dissolved, revealing the scene below. Leo looked down and saw them. They weren't shadows. They weren't walking away. He saw the family standing in a circle, their faces turned upward, and the golden dog glowing like a fallen star. "They stayed," Leo whispered, a tear finally breaking through his frozen expression. "They stayed for me." With that final realization, the vine of disconnect gave a final, silent shriek and crumbled into ash. The heavy gray cocoon around the gondola vanished, and for the first time, the scent of cinnamon and pine reached the boy's nose. The Ferris wheel, no longer choked by vines, gave a musical clink. The gears engaged, and the gondola began its slow, majestic descent. The carousel in the distance began to play a soft, tinkling melody, and the lights of the park changed from cold, frightening neon to a warm, sunset amber. The dream gardener and the labyrinth of abandonment Part 3. The Bloom of Eternal Connection. The Ferris wheel came to a soft, rhythmic halt at the very bottom of its arc. The heavy, suffocating silence that had once ruled the labyrinth was replaced by the cheerful, tinkling music of the park's carousel. Leo stepped out of the gondola, his small feet touching the tiles that were now warm to the touch. He still clutched his teddy bear, but his eyes were no longer fixed on the void. They were fixed on Barley. The golden retriever trotted forward, his tail wagging with such vigor that his whole back half swayed. He gave a soft, friendly bark and nudged Leo's hand with his wet nose. As the boy's fingers sank into Barley's warm, golden fur, a visible wave of light rippled through the air. The last traces of the gray fog dissolved like morning mist under a summer sun. "We told you we were coming," Mac said, stepping forward with a wide grin. "The Wheelers never leave a friend behind." Leo looked up at the family. I thought everyone had moved on," he whispered, his voice shaky but clear. "I thought I was just a ghost in a park where no one plays anymore." "You were never a ghost, Leo," Ellie said, kneeling down to look him in the eye. "Sometimes the world gets a little too loud or too busy, and it feels like people forget. But your heart knows the truth. You are seen, you are loved, and you are definitely not alone." Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to vibrate with a gentle, humming energy. The labyrinth, the maze of stone walls and silent booths, started to shift. But this time, it wasn't scary. The gray stones turned into flowering hedges of jasmine and honeysuckle. The empty popcorn stands transformed into fountains of sparkling starlight. The entire amusement park began to float upward, merging back into the beautiful, surreal landscape of the Garden of Eternal Dreams. With a final shimmering flash, the Wheelers and Barley felt the familiar snap of the dream world. They woke up standing back in Celestian's garden beneath the great silver willow. The air was once again sweet and full of music. Celestian himself stood before them, looking taller and more vibrant than ever. The gray ivy that had been choking the tree was gone, and in its place, a new plant had appeared. It was a magnificent, spiraling vine with orange flowers that glowed like miniature lanterns. These blossoms didn't just look like lanterns. They pulsed with a soft, warm light that matched the rhythm of a heartbeat. "The bloom of eternal connection," Celestian announced, his voice echoing like a silver bell. "Because of your courage and the pure heart of your golden companion, Leo has found his way back. The link between him and the world is restored. He will wake up today and see the smiles he thought were gone." Barley let out a long, satisfied yawn and sat down, his tongue lolling out in a happy grin. He looked quite proud of himself, and he had every right to be. He had turned a nightmare of silence into a symphony of scent and light. "2 weeds down," Arthur said, "but the garden is still vast." "It is," Celestian agreed, looking toward the distant horizon where a dark, icy mountain range loomed through the clouds. "The storm of change is brewing in the north. But for now, let the garden rest. You have brought hope to a place that had forgotten its name." The family climbed back into the wander wagon. As they drove away over the moonlight bridge, Max looked back one last time. He saw the orange lanterns of the new flowers glowing in the distance, a reminder that, no matter how far someone wanders into the fog, there is always a trail of gold that can lead them back home. Lily leaned against Barley, who was already snoring softly, his paws twitching as he dreamt of chasing butterflies through a meadow of starlight. "Good job, Barley," she whispered. "Good job, everyone." The wander wagon disappeared into the lavender mist, leaving the Garden of Dreams peaceful once more, waiting for the next adventurer to lose their way so the Wheelers could help them find it again. Good night. Subscribe to join the Wheelers family on their new adventure.